Welcome to our virtual meeting, Why You Should Bring Your Music to Asia. Our guest today is Andy Griffin, and I'm going to let Andy, this is a discussion, so just to let you guys know, if you have any question as we go, please put them in the chat, and I'll try my best to fire them as much as possible. You know how I do. We get as much as possible done in 1 hour. And I'm going to let Andy introduce himself and tell us a little bit about his career, where he's coming from, and all that good stuff. Andy, take it over.
Thanks very much, Andrea. Yeah, it's great to join everyone today. It's a late night for me because we're 6 hours ahead here in Thailand, so bear with me as we muscle on. But so really, Andrea, just to kind of answer your original question, like a lot of people in this group, I guess, musicians and so on, I started out like a lot of people playing the drums at school in bands, which kind of then led on to an interest in the recording side of things. So we're talking about the mid 80s in the UK. So it's more based around, 4-track Tascam cassette recorders and recording bands that I was working with, which then led into an interest in actually working in studios. So around 30 plus years ago, I went to study in Newcastle music tech, which is one of the sort of first one of these educational music colleges that were very nascent in those days. Obviously there's a lot more of those around at the moment, and that in turn led to working in studios. And like most people, and we just mentioned before, I ended up living and working in London, which I guess over the last 30 years has changed quite a bit, but at the time a lot of the studios were definitely there. Most of the late majors were certainly there, and a lot of the bigger independent labels were there. So yeah, I ended up doing that, worked at Universal, worked at Sony BMG for quite a long time, worked at Sony in the business affairs department, working on archiving a lot of their catalog, which was a huge project, which was actually, now looking back, they would have, it was kind of obviously pre-internet, pre-digital distribution, but obviously now they know the assets that they own, which is quite useful for them in terms of catalog and so on. So I did that for a few years, and then ended up in the here and now. My girlfriend at the time, going back to around 2003, 4, 5, was working for a UK-based supermarket, and she got a job with their Malaysian office. And so I kind of ended up going with her. This was for 1 year in 2006. So we're coming up to nearly 20 years. And I worked at Universal Music in Malaysia, which was my first experience of working in Asia, and also my first experience of getting to grips with different things like culture differences and language and so on and so on. And I worked there for 14 months on a fairly loose, broad role, which was business development. So I was working quite a lot with local brands such as AirAsia and telcos such as Maxis, Coffee Bean, and Starbucks, people like that. And we were talking with them about putting in physical CDs into some of these outlets. So you could kind of really date it. It was kind of between like physical pretty much dying off in its entirety, and then you had Spotify and Apple coming, and iTunes obviously coming through and sort of making streaming legalized and more widespread. So it was a very difficult time for the market. No one really knew what was going on. But I did that for 14 months, and then moved up to Bangkok, so in Thailand, which is where I am now, and I have been since 2007. And I ended up working for quite a major management company in Bangkok for about 11 years called Riverman. So I worked with quite a number of different artists, predominantly a band called Placebo. Worked quite a lot on the Asian touring and also promotion and marketing. And one genius thing about working with those guys was they own their own masters. So if they've recorded some new material, then part of my role would be finding licensing deals and partners to work with locally. Again, we were talking about just physical and also digital releases. So that was quite a lot of fun. But that took us up to around 2019, and obviously then we had COVID and everything changed for a lot of people, and particularly in the industry that we're all in. There's obviously a lot of things have kind of settled since then, and I'll come on to it a bit later on about the live scene, particularly in this part of the world, is sort of booming. But like a lot of people, I had to kind of take a look at what I was doing and how I was going to do things. So around that time, I started managing a Thai artist with another English guy over here. Her name was Pyra, and we signed her to Warner Music Thailand around the beginning of the pandemic. So the campaign was interesting. Obviously, we couldn't do any live. It really changed how we looked at how we were launching new artists. Through the back of that, I ended up working at Warner Music Thailand for a couple of years, working a lot on domestic Thai pop music, working on export, working on promotion and marketing ex-Thailand for some of these Thai artists, which was quite interesting, quite difficult to do. A lot of people know J-pop, a lot of people know K-pop, even know C-pop, but a lot of people still, and I'm sure we'll cover it later, find it very difficult to kind of listen to T-pop or Thai pop. It's very hard on the ear tonally and so on and so on. So there's lots of a myriad of reasons why it was quite hard to kind of get Thai artists ex-Thailand, and we got some shows and so on in various parts of the world, but nothing too huge. And then but then from that, kind of still do that, but pivoted a little bit more towards things like such as this, so conferences and speaking and moderating panels, but also mentoring artists. So I was saying to you, Andrea, just before the call, so now I have a number of clients across well, the US and in the UK and Europe, and artists that I work with on what I call like a retainer basis as opposed to a true management deal basis, where so they use me purely as a consultancy in role in terms of advice and strategy and contact and contact making for them. So it's had to be quite a change. Like a lot of people now, I'm working on my own. I work wherever I am at the moment. I'm not even in Bangkok. I'm outside the city. I'm on one of the islands working for 5 weeks. So it has kind of changed a lot about how I operate in terms of the artists I work with and the resources that I have and the amount of time that I can commit to certain projects, because all through part of that there are bands that I work with, particularly in Bangkok, that it's not on that basis. I do it because I love working with them and I want to keep my hand in locally. So it'll be more of like, okay, if I can help you and I like what you do, that's a personal choice that comes from the heart. So that's kind of how I work with local artists. But internationally, I do it just like this, like we're doing this now on a Zoom. And you can mentor, you can advise people on an ongoing basis. So you don't necessarily have to be in the same country as them. You know, you can definitely kind of bring a different mindset to things. So when I'm working with artists like that, it's not necessarily specifically about playing or shows in Asia or being over in this part of the world. It's more about, okay, you're an artist and I manage you. It's just that we're in completely different continents. So yeah, so that's kind of where I'm at the moment. But it's been, the core thing has always been about working with artists, working in studios. When you work with bands, you learn to read the room, you learn how to kind of work with creative people and the foibles that go with that. So that was a great grounding. But yeah, it's always core thread through all of that is actually being quite one-on-one, hands-on with the artist, as opposed to kind of working more in, say, an A&R role or a marketing role. It's been there's been a lot of touring and there's been a lot of day-to-day stuff, and for me that's, you know, that's still very much what I go back to now. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, I think we get the whole. Thank you. So going back to obviously what you're doing right now, which is management and consulting, a lot of our ladies here today are maybe looking for management. So how would you go? How would you find a manager? How do you find the artists themselves?
Right. Yeah. I mean, so we can talk about like very much local level and also like internationally. So yeah, my favorite way is the old school way, is actually you go and see a band in a you know, in a dark venue somewhere on a wet Wednesday night, and they blow you away. So the last few artists that I've worked with like locally, I've actually, the one band I actually met like a showcase. They played the showcase at Bangkok Music City, which is you know, a bit like South by, a little bit like The Great Escape, something like that. So actually, honest to goodness, meeting people and looking them in the eyeball and watching them play a set is my favorite way of doing it. I obviously now you use all the resources that you have to hand. So I know we talked about this a little bit before, but if I'm looking, if someone recommends someone or someone refers someone to me, obviously it's easy to check out maybe a live performance. It's easy to check out some of the songs, obviously on Spotify, YouTube, and what have you. But I tend not to try not to go with the numbers and go, oh, right, okay, you know, this isn't necessarily something I want to get involved with based on data. I want to get involved with based on, you know, how they make me feel. So yeah, other bands recommend other bands. People are in bands and they leave bands and they join other bands and they want you to help them. Also, on the local grapevine, so like rehearsal rooms are good places to find bands and or managers. Yeah, venues, getting onto the circuit, networking. But then outside of my local, yeah, people approach me through LinkedIn or my Facebook, or and ask, you know, they can see the 35 years of experience and so on, and they ask, okay, maybe there's something that we can do and we can work with together. So yeah, it's more a question of just keeping my eyes and ears, and I'll read about something as well. If you read about someone and it's a good article written by someone that you trust, then I'll go and check out the bands and obviously contact them quite easily if you need to. But if that's how I find them. But if you're an artist looking, yeah, it goes back to what we've talked about just before, that having that ability to network is very important. It obviously depends on makeup of your band. If you're a solo artist or a duo, you're going to have to do a lot more of the heavy lifting. If you're a 5-piece, there's always 1 or 2 people within a 5-piece band that are stronger personalities, or the guys who are going to work harder on certain aspects of networking or do the socials, or, you know, have the bid, write songs and so on and so on. So yeah, it's getting yourself out there and also just getting your head above the noise. But a good manager will tend to be always looking and will be open to what you got to offer, and they'll also be able to tell you quite quickly whether it's going to really work between you two parties or not.
Cool. Yeah, I agree. Thank you.
No problem.
So while right now we have a lot of artists and songwriters, I saw your question, by the way, I will get back to it, that are in the UK. What if they want to come to Thailand and perform there? How does one goes about to do that?
Okay, so I mean, anecdotally, locally, I've met quite a few people who have come over from the UK. One band from Coventry, one band from Glasgow. Admittedly, like small units, only like 2-piece, 3-piece bands. And I wouldn't encourage anyone to work illegally, but they've been over here on a trip, you know, on a long Southeast Asian holiday, and they bolted on some shows. So that's the most basic way you can do that. It's not ideal. Obviously, it's a bit hit and miss. But the other way of kind of doing it, if you're, say, in the UK and you wanted to come over to this part of the world, then a good way of reaching out is to people such as myself, but also do your research, look at some of the venues. And if we're going to talk about Thailand, we're really only going to talk about maybe 3 or 4 maximum different cities. So if you tour the UK or the US, you could play, you know, Bristol, Bedford, Manchester, I don't know, Rochdale, whatever else, and then Newcastle in a 5-6 night tour. Whereas over here, you're only going to really do Bangkok, at a push maybe Chiang Mai, which is a very big university town up in the northeast of Thailand, and maybe Phuket, at a push, which obviously is a lot of tourists go to that part of the world. So you might be playing to expats or non-Thai audience, certainly. But yeah, I mean, you'd be looking at Bangkok, you'd be realistic. You think, okay, obviously nobody knows it's over there, but you can reach out to some local promoters. There's some really amazing, I want to say kids because they're a lot younger than me, but there's a lot of really young local guys and expat guys working very hard particularly in the Bangkok scene. at the moment, bringing over and or working with a lot of very exciting Thai talent. So it'd be a question of connecting with those guys, and they're very hands-on. The guy that owns the venue books the venue. And then I would look at it from a point of view, okay, well, you could probably get away with doing a couple of shows in Bangkok, and there's more than a number of venues that would take you on. So yeah, I'd look at somewhere like Speaker Box or To Commune, or even somewhere down like on the river, Bangkok Island, where then, okay, well, you've got a semblance of a few shows there. We've got what might even call a tour, and then you would take it from there. The other thing that you could do, and again, we talked to Andrea about this before we started the call, is that there are Asia-centric, you wouldn't really agents / promoters. It's kind of a blurred role, but there are agents in this part of the world that would look at routing an entire tour for you. But it does go back to your profile and what capacity rooms you're going to be able to play, and what is your activity in terms of your releasing, and what's your social media strategy. They're not going to just go, okay, you guys come over here, we'll book you this room. You will still need to have some profile. And obviously the beauty of nowadays is you can see on Spotify for artists or TikTok for artists, or all on the platforms that you use to market yourself or distribute yourself even as well. You can see where your hotspot cities are, where are your trigger cities. So you say, well, actually, we get 500 monthly listeners in Chiang Mai. God knows why, but we just do. Then there's a basis to start. Okay, well, there's a demand there to see your show, and then we could start building from that. So yeah, it would take a long process, and also you have to carefully sort of define what you mean by Asia as well, because you got Southeast Asia and obviously where I am, it's Southeast Asia, and most of the countries in this region, there are predominantly English speaking, but not necessarily as a first language. So then you've got to throw into all these different things. You've got to think about tradition and cultural opportunities, but also things that you need to be aware of, do's and don'ts, and all these kind of things like that. So it's not just a simple question of booking a venue or booking your flights. There'd have to be quite a lot that goes in behind that to make that trip worthwhile. The showcases that I mentioned before, that they're not always Asia only. So you could look at things like Big Sound in Australia. You've got Melody Awards in Korea. You've even got Bangkok Music City here in Bangkok, which runs every year. They do have an international showcase element to it as well. So be aware that there are things that you can tap into as an international artist and play locally. But it would help you if you had some profile in some of these parts of the world already. So yeah, and/or another way would be if there's a band that you know that are touring already, if there's any way that you can bolt onto that tour support, get onto those shows as well, let them do the groundwork. Then all you've got to make sure is getting yourselves there and do the transport between the shows. So there are ways and means, but if it was me and I was talking to particularly a younger, more tech savvy, maybe let's say a solo artist, I would say spend a lot of time building your audience locally, and then you've got something to go to the venue owners and or the agents, promoters for this region. But that's the same anywhere. It's not just in Asia. You build a story, you build a narrative, and you build a following, and then believe you me, people will come looking for you.
Is the pay the same in Thailand that it is in the UK?
Is it what? Sorry, Andrew.
Is the pay
the pay?
Yeah, the pay. Is it the same?
For playing shows, do you mean?
Yeah. Just
in terms of monetary value, I couldn't answer, but in terms of model value, it's probably about the same. So basically, a lot of the bands here will be split on the door. So if you're talking at a slightly higher level, then you're talking about fees for artists here. There won't be, bands generally won't get the figures that they'll get, say, in Europe or the US, if they're of a certain stature and size. But then when you got your normal artists, your Taylor Swifts and your Coldplays of this world, when they're playing stadiums, then obviously the fees are astronomical. But It would be more a question here, a smaller level of, okay, if we play that show and it's a door split and we don't get any of the bar, but we get, we think we'll sell 300 tickets, then you can say, okay, well, all right, that's probably going to be, equivocal to maybe playing a much smaller venue in London, just for example. So yeah, but the costs of living and everything here are a lot cheaper. So that's reflected in everything that we do, cinema tickets to food to going to a concert. It is a little cheaper here. It's catching up, but it is cheaper. Yeah.
I'm just going to go over the questions. I have a consumer who asks, how does the songwriter brings the songs to Asia?
Great question. Okay, so I'm assuming, are you a solo writer? So you're kind of, it's everything, you do everything pretty much yourself. How do they bring it to Asia? Well, a great start would be to get a really good publisher. But if you haven't got a publisher that's very active and working your catalog or your songs in this part of the world, then well, one thing you can do really is, like I mentioned before, build very slowly. So these rules apply to no matter where you are in the world, but obviously build up an audience, release content, engage with them on the social media side. So there's some call to actions with your fans in terms of like sharing and or shows or competitions or whatever that you run around a release. But if you wanted to do that from an Asian point of view, what I would do is look at some of the local artists that you like. So when I say local, I mean predominantly Thailand, but I would look at some of the artists that you like or that you come across online and reach out to them or reach out to their representatives and see if you can do some collaborations, or you do some covers of local songs or some huge songs. This is my version of this. Or if you can work on remixes, if you're more in the electronic world, or if you're a DJ, it's more working on some mixes. So there are ways and means, but I would reach out. If you're grassroots, I would be reaching out to smaller artists here, saying, I really like what you do. Your average Thai artist, if you can get across the language barrier, are going to be quite impressed that someone in Sheffield is messaging them and wants to work with them. And if they like what you do, so that's how you would start. Obviously, you have major labels which kind of put these collaborations into place with 6, 9 months, 12-month strategy, marketing plans in mind. But at the level that I guess we're talking about, Andrea, it's more of a who can you reach out to locally. But again, this is not Asia based at all. But if you're a writer, keep writing songs and throw away more than you keep, and just be very, very kind of conscious of that. You have to keep moving forward with your art, and whatever way that you use for inspiration, whatever way that you use to kind of help with lyrics and so on and so on, just keep writing. That's my advice on that.
Yes. About management, when is a good time to get management, and what is the role of a manager in 2025?
That's a very good question. Right. So going back to my situation here, quite often I will get, this is more like in a venue, someone might come up to me and chat with me and they say, oh, we need a manager. And I quite often say, why? Why do you think you need a manager? Because obviously from a mentoring point of view, I will help with I'll help anybody, and you're talking to them about kind of like I could help you guys, but at the moment either you don't need my help or you're doing plenty enough of your own. So there's a number of stages obviously to a band's career. When you're just kind of kicking around in a rehearsal room, you don't need a manager. But when I was a kid, I was in a band. We had the guy that wasn't in the band was the manager, and it was a fun thing to say, we have a manager, right? But if you are looking to someone who's going to go, right, okay, I'm going to open up this whole new world to you, and it's going to be fantastic from that now on in, really, that's probably not the right person for you. If it was someone already within your organization, so a friend or someone that you knew, a recommendation, that quite often is the way. But then, like I mentioned before, you want to be in a position where people are approaching you. So you probably need a manager when you start getting offered deals where you start getting offered shows, where you start getting offered opportunities, particularly to play shows, say, outside of your own country, and suddenly you not start to need to coordinate a lot of these things and bring these things together. But bear in mind, anything that you do, if it's on a formal basis, they're going to want 20% of everything you do minimum, right? On live, on merch, on streaming, on whatever. So you have to think very carefully, especially if you're a 5-piece band. Suddenly it's going to be like 80% for 5 people and then 20% for one. So you have to think very carefully, at what stage do we actually, is this person bringing something to the table, or can we continue to do this ourselves? So it's a really difficult question to answer, because some bands are managed from day one, some bands are managed by one person for 30 plus years, and some bands change management every other album campaign or whatever else. But it goes to the next question. Yeah, what is a manager for in 2025? It's a very, very good question, and it is a question I ask myself quite a lot. Like I mentioned, I kind of started out working in studios and then labels, and had my own studio for a little while, and my label up in Northwest London, and so on and so on. And it did help a lot in terms of being a people person, being around people. So I kind of think about this quite a lot, because obviously over the last few years, you got a lot more management, a lot more tech, and very much more digital, very more marketing focused as well. And it used to be that you used to get lawyers to come and manage bands because they're great on the business side. And I think now you definitely have to be a little bit more tech savvy and be able to talk the talk in a lot of these kind of conversations. But I think management comes down to a few things. I'm a big football fan, and so I use sometimes the analogy from a football management point of view. Some players and some band members, they just need an arm around them, and to be told that they're great at what they do, and you reassure them. A lot of creative people obviously have a lot of kind of insecurities and what have you. And, you know, some artists are out and out, like just pure driven arrogance and ego, and they don't need that arm around them. But a lot of, some people that you'd be surprised are kind of very insecure about what they do. So for me, yeah, you've got on some management side, you've got like that human aspect, like, you ask about how the family are, how their friends are. You don't just talk about music and releases and shows. You kind of show an interest in their lives. And if I'm mentoring bands, I always do a questionnaire with them to get to know them a lot more. It's very important that you know people that you're meant to be managing them. And a manager's got to have a sort of side of, okay, very approachable, but their artist is their priority. So when it comes to working and defending their artist, then they're going to be as aggressive as they can be, right? And then on the other side, you've got to have someone who's good on the business side. So with the deals, with the particularly now where there's going to be a lot more sponsorship and branding involved, bands are offered a lot more opportunity to just pure music or collaborations and so on and so on. So someone who's got a good business head, someone who knows their way around the digital world and what's going forward in terms of, say, AI, and going forward in terms of VR and virtual concerts and things like this. Because as we've seen, say with ABBA, and I think the Stones are talking about this as well, you know, if you've got a 50-year-old career, then you're looking at how you take that to the next level. You see what they've done with the avatars and things like that. So if you've got someone within your team who's got that kind of tech savvy, but also forward thinking, then obviously the way that we consume and market and distribute music has changed radically over the last 20 years. So you need to have someone who's kind of aware of that. It's also, it would be great if you had a manager who's very well connected on the live side, who knew a lot of agents and knew a lot of other bands and knew a lot of other managers, because that's going to really help you get shows and festivals and those opportunities that most people don't get. So you want a manager that's got a lot of connections and a lot of a good network, and is happy to share those with you, and also is happy to kind of connect you with the right people, so it's not just completely random. You want to have some consistency across the board, but also it would help if you had a manager kind of who'd spent some time on the road as well, so they get to know the ins and outs of touring, how the demands of that, what it involves actually to keep a show going, and what the demands are on the artist, so they understand that. So the artist can't spend 8 hours of each day creating content for their socials. They actually understand that the artist should be kind of resting and or given the space to create. If they're on tour, you give them a chance to recover from the rigors of the shows and the touring. So it's just so to have an awareness of what it's like to be on the road. And then what else? Really just kind of that ability to go to shows, to network and to talk to the label people and the local sponsor and the competition winners, and be able to do all that even though you're absolutely jet lagged and exhausted. You just have to keep going, and because you're the sixth member of the band, and you're not playing on stage when they are, so the manager has to be out there pressing the flesh and hustling. And I mean, if I you do read and you hear about certain instances where and I'm talking at grassroots level, where the band will do the show and then they'll be out there hustling and doing the photos and the selfies and stuff like that. But then you hear the manager of the artist is gone, left already, and you think, no, you've got to be working your artists as hard as they are. You should be there too. You should do these conferences. You should do these pies. You should go to these shows and support the local scene. So what's the manager in 2025? I mean, and if you had an element of all of those things, then that's really going to help you. But the main thing, like I said before, is to have those connections and that network that's going to maybe give you some opportunities that you wouldn't already have. And also have thick skin, because you're going to get blamed for a lot of stuff.
What potential opportunities are there in Asia for a singer-songwriter, Cranberry vibes? Do you recommend touring or just aiming for recorded material at that market?
You said something vibe. What was that, Andrea?
I'm going to read the question again. What potential opportunities are there in Asia for a singer-songwriter? And the style is Cranberries vibe.
Oh, Cranberries, right.
Yeah. Right. Do you recommend touring or just aiming for recorded material at that market?
Well, this might not answer your question, but every single cover band in Bangkok and Pattaya and Phuket, and there's a lot of cover bands, they all play Zombie. Every single band covers Zombie, right? So you've got a good start there. So when you say Cranberries, it could be the kind of whimsical, kind of slightly folk alt version that they have, and then obviously they were kind of a rock act as well, certainly with elements of pop and kind of a lot of kind of localized feel to what they were doing. In what opportunities are there for an singer-songwriter artist that's Cranberries-esque?
Well, the question is, do you recommend touring or just aiming for recorded material?
Right, okay. Well, I'm always about the songs, right? So as much recording that you can and writing you can do, then that's all the better. But it would then give you a platform there to build on and go and to do other things. But if you're talking about working with an artist who's relatively new, depending on the circumstances, I would be like, go away for a while and write as many songs as you can, and start honing your craft a little bit. I will quickly tell you anecdotally, about 2-3 months ago, I approached to do a session with a Russian guy that was actually based in Luxembourg, and he said to me, I'm emailing all these record labels my songs, but they don't reply. And I said, how many songs do you have? And he said 2. And I was like, well, I'm not that surprised, because with the greatest respect, they're not really going to look at that. A publisher particularly is not going to look at an artist with only 2 songs. Particularly one of the bigger ones. So if I'm a singer-songwriter, and I would be focusing on building my repertoire, and then moving on from that, my live performance. You don't mention if you're a band or if you have a band, but then obviously if you don't, you would build a band and you hone them and get them to a point where you're confident about taking them out and doing some shows. But those rules, they apply anywhere. It doesn't just have to be in Asia. If you're a band, get in the rehearsal room and get writing. And if you've got 8 songs, do some shows.
How many songs do you think a repertoire should be? in order to submit or send?
Well, yeah, no, I mean, so if you're talking about, let's say there's sort of two situations here. Say you're a writer that's in a band and you're performing your songs in that band, or you're a singer-songwriter, you're sat at home, so you're playing maybe an acoustic, or you're using Ableton, or you're using just like some keys, and you're just kind of getting down some ideas of songs. So the answer to your question is, there's no maximum amount of songs or minimum amount of songs that you would need, but you need to have quite a few, particularly ones that would stand up on their own, as opposed to, okay, well, I've got one really good one and the other three are a bit rubbish. You'd want at least 10 or a dozen or so to go, right, okay, well, this is a very good sort of flavor of what I am about. I'm particularly proud of these 12 songs. It's a body of work, and that's at the point where you'd actually could start approaching publishers and say, okay, you know, somewhere like Warner, they might do like a one-sheet admin deal for you for that. I mean, a publishing deal is the same as a record deal. It's like there's no such thing as a good deal, particularly. It's just how little you can give away for how short a period as possible. That's the most important thing. So yeah, I would go back to your original question. I'd want at least a dozen or so songs to be sure of, okay, this is what I can take to people.
Cool. How does Thailand differ from the rest of Southeast Asia countries in terms of imported music consumption?
Right. Another good question. Okay, so how does it compare? Well, it's pretty open. It's quite open, right? So if we're looking at Southeast Asia as a whole, you've got countries such as Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, and so on, which we talked a little bit before about cultural differences. So there's things that you have to be aware of politically, religiously, and do's and don'ts, and so on and so on. Thailand, if you look at it as a whole, it's less conservative than some countries, shall we say. It's Buddhist, and so therefore you do have quite a few opportunities, say more so in the last few years in the world of hip hop. So we have a lot of hip hop festivals like Rolling Loud. We've got Creamfields coming later in the year. So the difference with Thailand is there's more people here, and you do get a lot more outside tourism, and you get cultural tourism. You get people coming from China and Korea and Singapore to see bands here, and then Australia also looking further afield to see artists here, because Thailand does have the infrastructure and the production and so on to put on some of these bigger shows that, say, Singapore or Korea, or even say Vietnam or Cambodia don't have that necessary infrastructure to do. So over the last few years here, and particularly on the arena size and on the sort of upper level touring circuit, they've built two new arenas downtown in central Bangkok. They're much better connected with transport and so on and so on. And that's made a difference, because then you've got artists who were only stopping off in, say, Singapore and, say, Seoul, are now stopping off in Bangkok as well. The trickle-down effect of that is what's good for the scene at the top, hopefully is good for the scene at the bottom. But you do see there's a lot more going on here. So to answer your question, how does Thailand differ? You're going to find a lot more people who are receptive to what you do here, I think, than in, say, some other parts of Asia, particularly if you're singing in English. There's always going to be a little bit of that barrier, but a lot of music here, such as like post rock and bands like Mogwai and Explosions of the Sky and a lot of new wave bands, they're very popular here because there's no lyrics. They don't need to worry about the translation. So there are ways and means of actually kind of getting a foothold over there. We talked about this before, but with collaboration and so on. So it's you would probably find more opportunities here in Thailand, yeah, than some of the other countries. And let's not forget also market size. Singapore is tiny, but it's a country within its own right. But you know, you could be the biggest artist in Singapore, but it's like being the biggest artist in your hometown. It doesn't necessarily translate into international success.
Are there any social media platform that are preferred in Thailand, or is it just your standard Facebook, Instagram, TikTok?
Um, well, I mean, TikTok particularly is an outlying champion in this part of the world, particularly for now not just marketing but also for distribution as well. So localized. We have there's obviously everyone knows about ByteDance and the DSPs in China and so on. And so we do have some localized DSPs. There's a very Thai-centric DSP called Fungi, which is quite fun. It's all very sort of organic, a little bit cottage run. And the guys that run that site also run a festival called Maharasop, which is in December, and they do a lot of other activities around work in the local industry. They run Bangkok Music City Conference as well. So there's Fungi, there's Joox, which is Joox, which is a very Thai-centric streaming service. It's very much, I mean, obviously you can pick it up anywhere, but I don't think they particularly market themselves outside of Thailand. And then you've got, there's another, KK Box, which is another DSP, which is Malaysia, Singapore, Thailand, Korea, I think. So that's in terms of distribution, but here, like YouTube is king and Spotify is king in terms of market share, and then TikTok in terms of like content creation and shares and actually like distributing and marketing the music. TikTok is far outside outlier in this country in terms of market share. So if you're on those three platforms plus a couple of the local DSPs, you should be covered.
Yeah. How difficult is it to get a touring visa in Asia, in Asian countries?
Yeah.
Or is it more difficult than others?
Well, for a start, this is what we said before about how do we define Asia, because it's not like, okay, pre-Brexit where an artist could go to all around Europe and play with one carnet and one permit and what have you. If you're coming to Asia, and let's keep it simple, let's say you come in Southeast Asia and you're playing Singapore, Malaysia, Korea, Hong Kong, Taiwan, Thailand, you need separate documentation for all of those countries. And so it would depend on what level of promoter you're working with locally. So that's, if you're working at Live Nation AEG level, they have dedicated teams that put together all the work permits and the process, and the band will have a very, very good, competent tour manager who deals with all of that, and you would go nowhere near any of this process. And as you come down the ladder and you get smaller, even at grassroots level, I'd expect a promoter in Bangkok to do all of that kind of paperwork for you. People do come in and, like I mentioned before, they'll come in on a holiday and they'll shoot loads of content on one of the islands and they'll go to a full moon party, but they'll also do a gig. And so they just bolt it on at the end. And if you don't travel with backline and stuff, then you can do this thing. But I wouldn't recommend that, particularly like places like Singapore and stuff like that. They're pretty hardcore on it. But yeah, that's why I would suggest you would work with maybe an Asia-centric agent / promoter who could actually work in all these territories individually, and they would have promoters on the ground and they would take care of all the paperwork for you. You pay, of course you pay, but it's like if you've only got 2 weeks holiday in the summer, it's sometimes easier to go on an escorted trip than it is to go on to somewhere in the middle and try and do it all yourself. So yeah, but there are agents and there are a lot more, the infrastructure and the network is there that you can tap into.
Great. Is there any way you would recommend getting your music to Asian audiences?
Any way in doing so?
Yeah, any special way you would recommend?
Okay. A brilliant way is to be on one of the TV shows here, one of the soap operas. That would be great if you get a sync deal on that. That would be ideal. They don't often use non-Thai music for a lot of these sort of situations, but a great way would be obviously make your music available in this part of the world, Asia as a whole. So work with an aggregator that services to some of the local platforms that we talked about. Another way is that we've talked about this before, is reach out to any artists locally that you like that are kind of operating the same arena and the same level as you are, and approach people and maybe look at trying to, I mean, I know it's basic, but use Google Translate or an app to kind of get your point across. Maybe change the language somewhat there. The other thing that you can do is create very kind of Thai or Asian centric content. So based around, I know it's a cliche, but it's true, based around things like food and fashion and music and culture and bubble tea, things like this. Any of those elements that you can bring in, not necessarily into your music, but into your kind of image, or what we did a day today, and this is what we filmed, and we kind of got involved in this project, or we went down to see this guy and we did this and we did this. It's all very kind of geared towards our fan base in Asia, because if you can see if you've got some trigger cities from maybe from Chartmetric or from Spotify priors, then there isn't any reason why you can't actually start to maybe target some of these cities quite individually, and actually try and create a bit of a groundswell and get a bit of a fan base there, and people there then will ask for you to come, because if they get into you and there's a chance that you're going to come over, they will support that. So yeah, it's not much different trying to break yourself in any part of the world. It's just being active on that scene and releasing content, and not just posting content, but also music and video content, just to kind of keep your name there bubbling away to a point where you can go, okay, well, maybe we're ready to go do that show there. But it's not going to happen overnight. I mean, minimum, you're looking at 6 months to kind of build before I would suggest you get on a plane and you come anywhere over here. And you could also employ the use of a local PR company or something like that. We're very, very specific and very targeted for this part of the world. I mean, there are ways of getting your name out there, but it's more about, do I want to focus on that part of the world? There are people that come and just play over here, because they do have some following in Beijing or in Shanghai or whatever. They will get on a plane and come over and do shows and do that.
I'm not sure if you have any insight on this, but do you know how to claim artist profiles on Asian streaming platforms such as QQ? I have a small audience there, but can't access my stats or profile from the artist end.
Oh, that's it. Okay, right. Well, the short answer to that is no, I don't. But I'm quite interested to hear your story about how that's happening. So you've built up. You say you've got a small following in China. So I'm interested to know. I'd be interested to know how that came about. Claiming online real estate. Yeah, I don't know how you would go about that. I would assume, like most of these big tech companies, you're not going to ever talk to a human. The other thing is also you've got a bit of a language issue barrier there between yourselves and them. So even if you could get a hold of someone who actually could do something about that, it might be difficult to understand what it is that you need to do. I would actually be more interested in building your following there and see whether you can gain ownership at a later stage. I know there's a risk inherent in doing that. But if you've got a small yet loyal following in a small pocket of China, then great. Yeah, I mean, that's, albeit I would look at trying to reach out and see if you can find any Mandarin or Cantonese speaking fans or someone within your network, your social network, that could help you maybe create some very Chinese centric content there, or look at anniversaries, look at days of the what's coming up. Obviously we had Chinese New Year in February, so what can we create around the Chinese culture? What is it that we can envelop and embrace from where we are? I'm assuming you're in the UK. What can we do to kind of help our case over there in China? And then maybe from that you can reclaim your what's yours. But to be honest, I don't know. I know it's quite difficult. I know that much.
Thank you for being honest.
Yeah. I wish I did that.
Yeah, no. We only have 7 minutes left. So I know you talked to me prior to this starting about how you were found on social media, and you were wanting to kind of share maybe a strategy or ways that artists can be found on social media. anything you would like to add? I know we froze. Did you get that?
You're talking about how an artist can be found on social media. Is that the question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, obviously, I mean, like, so I'm gonna be completely honest. I'm not like a huge digital marketing guru. I mean, like we talked about, what's the role of a manager? I know enough, I guess, to get by. But I guess it's more about the type of content that you post, but also some of the keywords, the SEO within that. The most simple terms, I can tell you anecdotally, I'm working with a band in the US, and a lot of their that we're talking about, I'm A&Ring an album for them, and a lot of their song titles are just one word or the something. And I did say to them, this is going to make it quite hard to kind of Google, do you know what I mean, in terms of trying to find because the band of the name is quite a common name as well. And it made me kind of think, has anyone kind of written song titles that are extremely SEOable, if that's a word? So it's kind of like you've got to think, how am I going to appear in searches? What's going to trigger someone looking for this, and how am I going to turn up in their search results? The other thing, obviously, you can do is paid adverts, so on TikTok, IG, Facebook, all the meta advertising, which will then, will tell you, you can target the demographic and the age and the area and exactly how you want that to appear in people's feeds. So that's another way. But it's more about what's the end game on that? Why am I doing that? Have I got a new release, or am I looking for people to engage on a call to action, bit of promotion or whatever? I mean, it's a whole new conversation really about breaking an ice digitally. It's for me, it's more about, obviously the songs, but you need to have a really strong campaign that, for me, also is the best things I've seen are where people have actually been able to interact and relate to the actions of that day. So you could think of a campaign that's going to run for 6 months, but they've actually been quite interactive on something that they wouldn't have known about, and it's only happened on that particular occasion. That's, for me, is pretty clever and shows a lot of kind of forward due diligence. But yeah, beyond that, it's how do you get above all the noise of everyone else that's releasing? That's the age-old thing.
How do you? This is
yeah. How do you? Yeah. I wish we
We'll
knew.
figure it out. We'll figure it out. Yeah. Is there anything? I think we've been through the question as much as possible. Oh, there is one more question, which was, how do you get to write a sorry, I'm looking at how do a songwriter try to write for T-pop?
The T-pop, right? Okay, yeah. No, obviously a huge amount of interest in that in the last few years. Yeah, I mean, on that note, I've noticed particularly a lot of international publishers. So some of the bigger independents like Concord or Cobalt or even Q Songs, people like that, they have a lot of writers in Korea now. They're Korean and or they're ex-Korean, but the people are writing for Korean eyes. So it's a massive market, isn't it? So that kind of did get a lot of interest in that part of the world. How do you write? Well, if you were going to write particularly for K-pop and you wanted to write for K-pop artists, my advice is keep writing, try and get a decent publishing deal, but also you can do a lot of legwork yourself. So you can kind of, again, you can have some cultural and some language barriers, but nothing that you can't get across. But you might then look at approaching some of these smaller agents. So again, it depends on definition, how you define the word. But agent in Korea, for me, is a lot of these like YM Entertainment, people like that, where they're kind of taking eyes from like where they're, from day one and building them. If you could, I understand the model in Korea is that a lot of it obviously is done in-house, so the management and the marketing and all the kind of putting together these artists is done in-house. So whether you can tap into some of these Korean powerhouses in pop, through the, so basically approaching these agencies. If it was me, I'd try and find some smaller Korean artists that seem to be doing quite well, but not like stratospheric, like Blackpink and so on that we all know about, and see if you can approach some of these people and write with them. You don't need to be in the same room anymore. Obviously, it helps. But yeah, get out there and network. It's the same with anything. It doesn't matter what area of the business that you're in. If you get out there and network virtually, obviously, you can reach out to people. You can connect with people. You can trade beats with people, and you can collaborate. And so, yeah, I would. But if you really want to be a K-pop writer, I would focus on who are the people that I need to know in Seoul and or LA and or London, and who can I write with, and also who can I pitch to. So if you've demoed up a song that is pretty much finished, like who are you going to be pitching that to, who are you going to be sending that to? And if you can afford it, jump on a plane and go over to like a conference there. They do quite a lot of network. They do quite a lot of like I say, the Great Escape, which is a combination of like conference and showcase. There's quite a lot of events like that in Korea, but it's going to be the same as anywhere. Be prepared to really hustle and work really hard in terms of making those connections.
Okay, I just have one question. What's the festival in Korea? You mentioned one festival in Korea. Somebody keeps asking me about. Mary.
So there's in Korea, you've got Jisan and you've got Pentaport. The one I think I mentioned actually is in Taiwan. It's called Golden Melody Awards. But there are also in September, there is a conference in Singapore called Music Matters, which has been running probably the longest. And they also have an element of fintech and keynotes and so on and so on. But the one, in Taiwan would be the Golden Melody, and in Korea you've got, as I said, Pentaport and Jisan, and but there are some smaller events going on away from that. We've got an event actually in Thailand called La La Land, which is in December. It's in Chiang Mai. It's for its second year. I'm going to go this year because I'm interested to see in a different city and see how they work these things. It's like a very small South by. So yeah, there are. If the question was, are there opportunities at some of these other events? Then yeah, absolutely they are. But before you go through the process of applying and so on, make sure that they're not just Asia centric, and they do have some international platforms that you can appear on.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Andy.
No problem.
Is there any way our people can get in touch with you? Could I share your, email, Instagram info?
So the best way, to be honest, Andrea, is on LinkedIn. So you've got my details, right? Because I'll show you.
I'm going to try to do it right now so everybody has it.
or the other way is my email, which is probably easier if I just tell you to now. And then, so it's Andy with karmasoundstudios.com. So I'll spell that. It's KARMA sound, which is SOUND, and then it's studios with an S.com. But I'm on LinkedIn. I'm also on Facebook, but I use that more for fun stuff. But yeah, I'm always interested in talking to new artists, particularly from a mentoring point of view. I do quite a lot of work for Talyard in the UK and also Waterbound. It's on that basis. It's like, an hour here, 30 minutes here, that kind of thing. So if people got other questions as well, also just reach out and drop me a line. The other thing I say is if people are coming over to this part of the world, let me know, because I'm more than happy to kind of give you my benefit of living here for nearly 20 years. It's sometimes quite good to get a local point of view. So yeah, feel free to reach out.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for everybody who joined. We'll be back.
Good to see you, everybody.
He's been, by the way, in Thailand right now. It's what, 12 a.m., right?
It's now, what time is it now? No, it's 1 o'clock now.
1 a.m. 1 a.m.
Yeah,
so thank you so much for joining.
Yeah, but it's great, great to see you, Andrea. Thank you, and it was great meeting everyone. The questions were brilliant, and they've made me think about it. No problem.
Thank you. Thank you. Have a good
Bye.
night. Bye.